You were born craving sugar, not because of processed food or advertising or bad habits, because of something that happened millions of years before any of those things existed. The craving is ancient. The abundance is new. And the gap between those two things is the most important thing to understand about why sugar is such a problem right now. The human preference for sweetness is not a cultural preference. It is a biological one, and it predates our species by millions of years. Sweet taste receptors exist to solve a very specific problem. How do you know if a piece of fruit is right and safe to eat without testing it and potentially getting sick? The answer is taste. Ripe fruit is sweet. Unripe or toxic fruit is bitter or sour. Our ancestors who liked sweet things ate the right fruit at the right time and got the calories they needed. The ones who did not were at a disadvantage. That preference was selected for across millions of years of primate evolution. Long before Homo sapiens existed, our ancestors were already wired to find sweet things desirable. We inherited that wiring intact. For most of human evolutionary history, fruit was the primary source of dietary sugar, and it was not always available. Fruit is seasonal. It grows in specific places. Finding it required knowledge, which trees bore fruit when they ripened, where to look across a territory. For hunter-gatherers, fruit was a prize rather than a staple, a calorie-dense windfall that the body was primed to seek, consume as much of as possible, and store as fat for leaner times. That storage mechanism, eating sugar now, stored as fat for later, is still running in every human body. It was a brilliant adaptation for a world where sweetness was rare. It becomes a liability in a world where sweetness isn't everything. If fruit was the everyday sugar source, honey was something else entirely. Honey is the most calorie-dense sweet substance available in nature. A single kilogram of honey contains around 3,000 calories. It does not spoil. It can be stored almost indefinitely. For a prehistoric human, finding a wild bee colony was the nutritional equivalent of finding treasure. We know ancient humans were collecting honey because they painted it on cave walls. The most famous example is the Cueva de la Araña, the Cave of the Spiders, in Spain. On the cave wall is an 8,000-year-old painting showing a human figure climbing what appears to be a rope or vine to reach a wild bee colony in a cliff face, surrounded by bees with one hand reaching into the nest. The figure is collecting honey at considerable personal risk. The fact that someone thought this was worth painting tells you exactly how significant honey was. That is 8,000 years ago. The actual behavior almost certainly goes back much further. Chimpanzees raid bee nests. The Hadza people of Tanzania, one of the last hunter-gatherer societies still living in their traditional way, consistently rate honey as their most prized food source. Honey was not a treat. It was a goal. Sugarcane. The plant that eventually gave the world refined sugar was first domesticated in New Guinea around 8 to 10,000 years ago. From there, it spread slowly across Asia, reaching India, where by around 500 BCE, people had figured out how to crystallize it into something resembling the white sugar we recognize today. For most of human history after that, refined sugar was so rare and so expensive that it was kept locked up and dispensed in tiny amounts by apothecaries. When Alexander the Great's army reached India in 327 BCE, one of his generals wrote home describing sugarcane as reeds that produce honey without bees. They had never seen anything like it. In medieval Europe, sugar was worth more than most spices. It was a luxury of the wealthy. It was not until the 17th and 18th centuries and the brutal economics of the Atlantic slave trade that industrialized its production that sugar became cheap and widely available. So, when did ancient humans start eating sugar? From the beginning. The biology for it came first. The sweetness of ripe fruit was the original source. Honey was the greatest prize the natural world offered. Refined sugar came late, became cheap almost overnight in historical terms, and found a nervous system that had spent millions of years learning to consume every bit of sweetness it could find whenever it appeared. The craving was not designed for this world. It was designed for one where sweet things were hard to find. That craving has not changed. Only the supply has. Like and subscribe if you enjoy these videos. I'll see you in the next one.